Hey, I'm Tyler Suarez. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, composer, artist, activist, and today we're going to be talking about modular synthesis. So I guess the best place to start is explaining that synthesis is just manipulating waveforms. At the bare bones of synthesizers and synthesis in electronic music, it's sound waves and voltages. That's it. So everything you hear coming from your modular synthesizer or any other synthesizer is just those two components being manipulated. The biggest difference between a regular synthesizer like this one and a modular synthesizer rack like the one we're going to be exploring today is that on a regular synthesizer, all the connections are already made for you. They're connected inside of the synthesizer already. So you don't need to do anything besides change some knobs that then change the voltages. So you don't have to patch anything, you don't have to know the inner workings of the synthesizer. The synthesizer is doing the complicated hard work for you, and you can just press down on the keys and maybe change some knobs depending on what you want to hear. With a modular synthesizer, you are in complete control of all the connections. So modular synthesis could be a little tricky to understand in the beginning, and that's where I'm at right now. I have this beautiful modular rack that I've been creating, researching all the components that I need to make a rack that I can use effectively in my music creating in my life. But all that stuff is super complex, and you can really go down a rabbit hole in what modules to get, and you'll end up spending a lot of money compared to just buying a synthesizer. But the beauty is you're creating your own synthesizer. If you want to get a specific sound or you have a specific need, you can buy a specific module to place into your rack that helps you accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. So the thing you need to do right off the bat is realize it's going to be kind of pricey in comparison to just buying one synthesizer. But you have to take into consideration that you're creating your own synthesizer, and no other synthesizer you could just buy for a couple $100s is gonna do what you're gonna make your modular system do. Price is one of the things that pushed me away in the beginning, and I just focused on buying synthesizers as is, because it does add up. But if you take into consideration all the things you can explore with modular, the price isn't much different than if you had to buy this synthesizer to get this task done and this sound to be produced, and then buy another synthesizer to create this sound. Another factor that made me not get into modular sooner is the complexity. That's why I'm creating this video, to kind of walk you guys through it with me. I'm just a beginner, and there's a lot I can learn. So sit back, relax, grab a nice cup of coffee, and let's walk through my modular system, the modules that you need to get started, and let's create our first patch together. So here it is. This is my modular system that I've created. So each one of these is its own module, so you can purchase them separately and create your own synthesizer. This right now is playing a patch that I've created, and it sounds something like this. So that sound is being created by all these patch points that I've made myself. So when you have your own modular system, it's not going to sound like that. And when I take all these out, it's never going to make that same sound again, exactly. That's the beauty, it's temporary. So what you'll start off with is something like this. A blank canvas to where you can create all the sounds your heart desires, providing you have the specific modules in which can help you create those sounds and bring them to life. So the biggest thing is that this makes no sound right now. I have it running through these speakers so we can all listen together, and there's no sound coming from it. The first thing you need to do is connect the box to all your modules. So what I'm going to do is run everything through the DSP pico module. So I'm going to take the out of that and put it to the in of the box. Now I can connect all of these to this module, and it'll connect it to the box. So it's a very visual, a very beautiful way of thinking about music. you're taking all the sound and running it through this cable that's then going out into the speakers and vibrating them to create sound. In talking about modules, the first one we need to start off making sound is some sort of VCO, which is a voltage controlled oscillator. And it essentially does that. It controls the oscillator through voltages. Now, again, remember, all sound is just waveforms and voltages. That's it. So if we take the out of this and put it into the in of the box, we get a beautiful waveform, which we can control right here. We can go from a sine wave all the way down to a square wave. So this is just a note, and what we can do is quantize it or not. So right here, if we don't quantize it, we can get microtonal stuff. Or if we hit quantize, we could get semitones of the scale. And we can control the octave. So if you want to control this externally, what you're going to need is some sort of sequencer. And I recommend the Cells by Create Audio. It's a beautiful interface of these little pressure point touchpads to where you can just tap them and it will change the notes. So what we want to do is take the control voltage from the hysteria up here and then patch it to the control voltage of our sequencer. And now if we listen into that, put the octave up, we can change this knob by touching these pressure pads. What I'm going to do really fast is tune each one of these notes so they all sound good together. I don't want to show you me tuning each one of these individual pressure pads because that could get a little boring, but what I want to show you is that you can create chords across rows just by controlling the voltage that you're sending into the sequencer. Okay, so I have all these tuned up. Let's just listen to that for a sec. So you could either just play that as is, or you can have something called an LFO control that. So we have this Utopia CV audio manipulator, which has an LFO in it, which is a low frequency oscillator, which is something that you can't hear. The voltage isn't fast enough to produce waveforms that our ears can hear, but the voltages can control the waveforms that we can hear. So they create this like rhythmic element to the voltage, which then can translate into sound. So that sounds a little bit confusing, which is why I never got into modular, because that explanation sounds super complex. But if you see it in practice, it's not at all. If we were to take a patch point to control what note is being played, it doesn't even need to be a specific module. You just need to put voltage into this chord. That was really like an epiphanatic moment when I realized that. So if we take the LFO out from this Utopia module and put it into here, we can see these pressure points are now changing automatically in correspondence to the rate of the LFO, which can be controlled here. So if I speed it up, they get super fast, or I could slow it down, they could be nice and slow and move on their own. So what that sounds like is this. So that's already more musical than what it was just a few moments ago, using an LFO to control our sequencer. So what we can do now, instead of just putting it straight into the output, we can take this signal, which we were just listening to, and put it into some sort of delay. So put that into the input, and then we can take the master output and put it into the input. So what we just did is added delay into that sound. And we can, on this specific nostalgia module, by Dreadbox, we can control the mix, and the time, and the feedback. And we can get some beautiful sounding things just from adding delay on top of this controlled voltage. So the main modules I would say you need to start off with are some sort of CV audio manipulator that has an LFO, a VCO, a voltage controlled oscillator, and then you need some sort of sequencer to control those sounds in those notes that you're producing. And then some extra things you might want to have are like a reverb module and a delay module, which can really make your sounds very atmospheric and ambient. Another thing I want to point out is that you can have something called a VCA. So if we were to take what we were just putting into the direct out, we can then put it into the first channel of the mixer instead. And then we can take the out of that mixer and put it in. And raise the volume. So now this module acts as a mixer, which allows us to then have 3 separate tracks that then we can bring in or out at certain points. If I were to take this radio music module by Music Thing Modular, and we take the output of that into the second input of the mixer, we have the sound coming from this module. This module is super cool because it has this guy in it. It just has a little SD card, which has samples on it. The samples I have on it right now are samples of people talking on the radio, which is what you just heard. And you could change the station, which is changing the samples. So we have that running straight into channel 2 of the mixer. So if you were to use this in a musical way, you can bring this down and then bring in our sequencer sound. What I just did was changed which sequence was being played. If we just listen to that again, it's just playing this row right here in the rate that the LFO is set to. And then if I press here, it changes to this row of these notes. So you can change the chords that are being played just by pressing down on one pad. And what I also was doing is just controlling the levels of channel 1 and channel 2 and controlling which sample was being played to give it a more musical sound, give it some more life. That's the basic elements of a modular system. Again, you can just start plugging away. It doesn't need to be specifically like this. You don't need these specific modules. But the key thing I want to stress is that you can sit here for hours and try and figure out the science and the mechanics of all these modules, what they're doing, how they're doing it, what should go where, and try and learn the modular system. But I think the key element of modular synthesis is instead of learning the modular system, you should learn from it. So just start patching away, and then you'll soon be comfortable with what goes where to get a certain sound. So there you have it, just the basic elements of what a modular system needs and what it can do, and how honestly you can just experiment until you get something that maybe sounds cool to you and maybe just sounds like a bunch of bleeps and bloops to somebody else. Again, music is not meant to be this prestigious thing that only certain people who study music theory and know how certain voltages transform into certain waveforms. Music is meant to inspire and for you to express yourself. So maybe think about investing some time and some money into modular synthesis. I feel like you'll really be surprised. I'm still constantly learning from this thing. It's nice to just sit down with it And it's almost like having a conversation with somebody that you've never met. Every single time you sit down with it, there's going to be something new that they tell you, and there's going to be some kind of realization that you have from what they said. So I hope this was informative. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope you go make some music now. See ya.